Ancient rulers were obsessed with permanence. They built in stone, carved their names into mountains, bent rivers, and reordered calendars, all in service of a single impossible goal: to last. Among these efforts, none was more intimate or more cruel than the belief that power could be carried beyond death if it was shared. Thus emerged the legend remembered as the bride of the Undying King, a story preserved not through poetry or praise, but through bone, silence, and a mistake that time refused to conceal. The king in question ruled at the height of his civilization's power. His name appears repeatedly in inscriptions that celebrate conquest, prosperity, and divine favor. He was called Ever Standing, Chosen of the Sun, and most tellingly, He Who Will Not End. These were not metaphors. The king did not merely wish to be remembered. He believed, with priestly encouragement, that death itself could be negotiated. His court scholars taught that the soul was fragile at the moment of death. Alone, it could falter, lose its way, or dissolve. But guided especially by a living tether, it could pass intact into eternity. A companion, bound by ritual and devotion, could steady the king's spirit as it crossed into the afterlife. Not a servant, not a priest, a bride, she was chosen young. Records disagree on her exact age. Some suggest 14, others perhaps 16. What they agree on is that she was healthy, unblemished, and of noble, blood-important qualities for someone expected to walk beside a god. She was presented to the court as an honor, her family elevated, her name sung in ceremonial halls. Gold and white became her colors, gold for immortality, white for purity. From the beginning, her role was clear. She was not being married for life. She was being married for death. The wedding was lavish beyond necessity. Foreign dignitaries were invited. The streets were strewn with flowers that would later rot unnoticed. The bride wore layered silks embroidered with symbols of rebirth and eternal union. The king, already aging, stood rigid beside her, his posture maintained by habit rather than strength. Together, they enacted a performance meant to reassure the living that the future was secure even beyond the grave. Priests declared that their bond was not bound by breath. When the king died, they said, the bride would follow, not as a sacrifice, but as a guide. She would lead him through the darkness. She would speak his name to the gods. She would ensure his rule continued where mortal authority failed. The bride did not speak during the ceremony. None of the accounts mention her voice. The king died within a year. His death was not sudden. Chroniclers describe an illness that drained him slowly, allowing ample time for preparations. The tomb was carved deep into the earth, its walls lined with reliefs depicting the king receiving homage from ancestors and deities alike. Offerings were stacked in side chambers: food, weapons, vessels, jewels. At the center lay the sarcophagus, carved from a single slab of stone, and beside it a second space. On the day of burial, the bride was dressed again in gold and white. Her garments were heavier this time, layered with jewelry meant to mark her importance in the next world. Some accounts suggest she was given wine mixed with herbs to calm her spirit. Others imply something stronger. None describe her resisting. None describe her consenting either. She was placed into the tomb alive. The priests spoke prayers meant to seal not just stone but fate. They declared that the bride would awaken in the realm beyond and take the king's hand, that she would never be alone, that love, sanctified by ritual, would triumph over decay. The tomb was closed. Stone does not listen. For centuries, the burial chamber remained untouched. Dynasties rose and fell. Languages shifted. The king's name endured in fragments, while the bride's faded almost entirely. She became an accessory to his legend, a footnote to his ambition. The idea of the Undying King survived longer than the truth of how he had tried to become one. When archaeologists finally opened the tomb, they expected symmetry. Two bodies lying side by side, facing eternity together. Ritual texts suggested peaceful union, eternal companionship. What they found instead unsettled even seasoned excavators. The king lay exactly as intended. His skeleton was centered within the sarcophagus, adorned with regalia, his skull tilted slightly upward as if still receiving praise. No disturbance marked his remains. The grave goods around him were intact. Time had treated him kindly, or at least indifferently. The bride was another matter. Her skeleton was not facing the king. At some point, whether early or late is impossible to know, she had turned away. Her spine curved sharply, her body angled toward the wall of the chamber. One arm was bent awkwardly, the hand pressed near her face. The other reached forward, fingers extended toward stone that never moved. Her fingernails were worn down to the bone. This detail appears again and again in the excavation reports, underlined, repeated, rewritten, as if the scholars themselves struggled to accept it. The wear was not consistent with ritual handling or post-burial damage. It was the kind of abrasion caused by repeated scraping against a hard surface. By stone, her jaw was open, not in a ceremonial posture, not relaxed. The mandible was stretched wide, frozen in a position that suggested strain, effort, or a final, unanswered breath. No amulet rested in her mouth, no coin for passage. Whatever words she may have spoken at the end were absorbed by the tomb. There was no evidence of poison in the bones, no sign that she had died before sealing. The conclusion was unavoidable and deeply uncomfortable. She had lived long enough inside the tomb to understand what had been done to her. The priest's promises did not reach her. Later analysis showed something even more disturbing. The bride's remains had shifted slightly after death, not enough to suggest intervention, but enough to imply that rigor mortis had not set in immediately. She had moved in the dark, she had struggled. She had turned away from the king she was meant to guide. The king, meanwhile, slept undisturbed. In the centuries that followed the tomb's discovery, scholars attempted to soften the narrative. Some suggested the bride's position was symbolic. Others proposed that animals or seismic activity had altered her remains, but the evidence resisted reinterpretation. The marks on the stone near her hands aligned with her fingernails. The wear was localized, desperate, human. There was no romance in it, no transcendence, only endurance followed by silence. The legend of the Undying King did not survive the excavation intact. Visitors no longer speak of his wisdom or power without mentioning the bride. She has become the story's gravity, pulling interpretation back toward reality. Her turned skeleton contradicts the myth more forcefully than any inscription ever could, because death does not honor vows spoken for convenience. Stone does not uphold ideology. And eternity, when imposed, is not companionship, it is confinement. The king wanted to rule forever. He believed immortality could be secured through possession, through ritual, through another person's breath expended on his behalf. He succeeded only in preserving himself. The bride preserved something else entirely. Her bones tell the truth the priests could not, that she did not guide him, that she did not follow willingly, that when the final moment came, she chose distance, not union. She turned away. In the end, the king was undying only in memory. The bride was eternal in evidence, and between them lies the quiet, unmovable fact that power cannot bargain with death, only borrow from the living and leave the cost behind. Our journey begins in the year 1421 in a small, isolated convent in the heart of rural France. The convent of Saint-Jean-le-Pauvre was a place of quiet devotion, home to a small community of nuns dedicated to a life of prayer and solitude. Among them was a young woman named Amélie. By all accounts, she was ordinary, pious, quiet, and unremarkable. But Sister Amélie harbored a secret, a phenomenon so unnatural that it would eventually lead to the downfall of her entire community. It started subtly. A fellow nun, while sweeping the cloister at dusk, noticed something odd. As Sister Amélie walked past the torchlit wall, her shadow seemed to waver. The nun blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her in the flickering light. But the next evening she saw it again, and this time she was certain. Amélie's shadow wasn't just one shadow. It was two. One shadow was perfectly normal, mimicking her every move as a shadow should. But the other, a darker, more elongated twin, moved with a slight delay, sometimes twisting into shapes that didn't match Amélie's form at all. The nun kept her discovery to herself at first, terrified of what it might mean. Was she going mad? Or was she witnessing something truly unholy? Her silence didn't last long. Soon, other nuns began to notice. Whispers filled the cold stone corridors of Saint-Jean-le-Pauvre. The split shadow became a source of fear and fascination. Some nuns would secretly follow Amélie, hoping to catch a glimpse of the phenomenon. They observed that it only happened in low light, when sources like candles or the setting sun cast long, deep shadows. In the bright light of midday, Amelie was just like them. But as twilight descended, her spectral twin would emerge. The second shadow was described as inkier and more active than the first. While one shadow would be still as Amelie prayed, the other might seem to twitch or slowly creep along the wall, independent of her body. The nuns were terrified. They began to avoid Amelie, crossing themselves whenever she passed. The convent, once a place of peaceful community, was now fractured by suspicion and fear. Amelie herself became increasingly withdrawn, aware of the whispers and the fearful glances. Imagine the torment she must have felt, haunted by a phenomenon she couldn't control or explain. The Mother Superior of the convent, a stern and pragmatic woman named Mother Isabel, could not ignore the growing hysteria. At first, she dismissed the stories as fanciful gossip, the product of overactive imaginations in a cloistered environment. She reprimanded the nuns for spreading such tales. But one evening, she decided to see for herself. She summoned Sister Amelie to her private study, lighting only a single candle on her desk. As Amelie entered and stood before her, Mother Isabel watched the wall behind her, and she saw it. The solid, normal shadow of the young nun, and beside it, a second, darker silhouette that seemed to writhe and stretch of its own accord. The sight struck a chord of primal fear in the seasoned abbess. This was no trick of the light. This was something else entirely. Mother Isabel knew she could no longer handle this internally. The situation was beyond the scope of convent discipline. It was a matter for the church itself. With a heavy heart, she penned a letter to the regional bishop, detailing the strange and disturbing events surrounding Sister Amelie and her split shadow. She wrote of the fear gripping her community and her own personal confirmation of the unnatural phenomenon. The letter, carried by a trusted messenger, would set in motion a chain of events that would seal the fate of the convent forever. The church, in this era, did not take such reports lightly. Accusations of witchcraft and demonic influence were rampant, and any sign of the unnatural was treated with the utmost seriousness. The bishop's response was swift and severe. He dispatched two of his most trusted inquisitors, Father Bernard and Father Thomas, to investigate the convent of Saint Jean le Pauvre. These were not gentle men. They were seasoned investigators of heresy and the supernatural, men who saw the devil's work around every corner. Their arrival cast a pall over the already fearful convent. The inquisitors began their work immediately, separating the nuns and interrogating them one by one. They were looking for any sign of heresy, any deviation from orthodox belief, any crack through which evil might have entered. The nuns' terrified testimonies about the split shadow only confirmed the inquisitors' darkest suspicions. They saw it not as a strange, natural anomaly, but as a clear sign of demonic possession or a pact with dark forces. The focus of the investigation, of course, was Sister Amelie. She was isolated, subjected to days of relentless questioning. Father Bernard and Father Thomas probed every aspect of her life, her past, her private prayers, her thoughts. They performed exorcism rites, chanting prayers and splashing her with holy water, hoping to provoke a reaction from the entity they believed was attached to her. But Amelie remained steadfast. She wept, she prayed, she insisted she had no knowledge of why this was happening. She was as terrified as everyone else. The inquisitors documented everything. They observed the shadow phenomenon themselves, describing in their detailed reports how the second shadow seemed to mock the cross and recoil from holy names, though it is impossible to know if this was objective observation or a projection of their own beliefs. They noted that Amelie herself showed no signs of possession, no speaking in tongues, no unholy strength, yet the shadow persisted, a silent, damning witness against her. After weeks of investigation, the inquisitors came to a terrifying conclusion. They could not prove that Sister Amelie was a witch, nor could they successfully exorcise the demon they believed was attached to her. The phenomenon was inexplicably tied to her, but it seemed to have a life of its own. They feared that the entity, whatever it was, had tainted the very stones of the convent. It was an infection that could not be cleansed without destroying the host. Their final report to the bishop recommended a drastic and unprecedented solution. They declared that the convent of Saint-Jean-le-Pauvre was a site of an incurable spiritual plague. The evil was too deeply embedded, centered around Amélie but contaminating the entire grounds. Their recommendation was to seal it off from the world permanently. The bishop accepted their grim verdict. A decree was issued. The convent of Saint-Jean-le-Pauvre was to be deconsecrated and abandoned. The remaining nuns were scattered, sent to other convents across France with strict orders never to speak of what had happened. They were to live out their days in penance for having been exposed to such a powerful evil. And what of Sister Amélie, the nun of the split light? Her fate is the most tragic part of the story. She was not to be transferred. The inquisitors deemed her the source, the anchor of the phenomenon. To let her leave would be to risk spreading the contagion. So, she was to be left behind, walled up within the convent that had been her only home. A small team of masons was brought in. Under the watchful eyes of the inquisitors, they bricked up the doors and windows of the main chapel and Amélie's cell, entombing her inside. She was left with a simple cross, a supply of bread and water, and her terrifying, constant companion, the split shadow. For centuries, the story of the nun of the split light faded into local legend, a terrifying bedtime story told to scare children away from the ruins of the old convent. The sealed buildings slowly crumbled, overgrown with ivy and reclaimed by nature. The place was considered cursed, and no one dared to venture near it, especially after dark. But the story doesn't end there. In the late 19th century, with the rise of interest in spiritualism and historical mysteries, a group of paranormal investigators from Paris learned of the legend. Intrigued, they traveled to the site of the forgotten convent. They found the ruins just as the legends described, including the main chapel, its doors and windows still crudely bricked up after more than 400 years. They decided to spend the night, setting up their rudimentary equipment: early cameras, temperature gauges, and audio recording devices. What they experienced that night became a seminal event in early paranormal research. As dusk fell, they reported a dramatic drop in temperature around the sealed chapel. They heard faint sounds from within what they described as soft weeping and the scraping of stone on stone. But the most significant event happened as they lit their lanterns. On the ancient, vine-covered wall of the sealed chapel, a single, distorted shadow appeared. It had no source. No person was standing in the path of the light to cast it. The shadow was that of a slender figure in a nun's habit. And as they watched, transfixed in horror, the shadow split in two. One remained still, while the other began to move, twisting and contorting on the wall, a silent, spectral dance of a soul trapped for centuries. The terrified investigators documented their findings, and their report brought the legend of the nun of the split light back into the public eye. To this day, the ruins of the convent of Saint-Jean-le-Pauvre are a hotspot for paranormal enthusiasts and ghost hunters. Visitors and investigators continue to report strange occurrences. The most common report is, of course, the reappearance of the split shadow on the chapel wall at twilight. People have captured photos and videos of the strange phenomenon, shadowy forms that appear and move with no discernible source. Others report hearing disembodied whispers, the sounds of weeping, and an overwhelming feeling of profound sadness and despair that permeates the area. Is it the lingering spirit of Sister Amélie, forever bound to the place of her horrifying demise? Or is it the dark entity that attached itself to her, still haunting the cursed ground? We may never know the true story behind the nun of the split light. Was it a genuine supernatural event, a case of mass hysteria, or a misunderstood natural phenomenon? Whatever the answer, the tale of Sister Amélie serves as a chilling reminder of how fear and the unknown can lead to tragedy, a story whose shadow still stretches across the centuries. Imagine you're walking through a field, metal detector in hand, hoping for a lucky find. A small coin, maybe a button, suddenly a strong signal. You dig, and what you unearth isn't just one coin, but a solid, corroded green mass. This is exactly what happened to Reg Mead and Richard Miles on the island of Jersey. A moment that would change their lives and rewrite a piece of ancient history. This is the story of the Licatellan II hoard, one of the largest Iron Age coin hoards ever discovered, and the dark secret it holds. For 30 years, Reg and Richard had been searching. They were following a local legend, a whisper passed down through generations about a farmer who, decades earlier had found a clay pot filled with silver coins while pulling up a tree. The story was vague, the location lost to time, but it sparked a relentless obsession. They scanned field after field, year after year, finding little more than modern scrap. Most people would have given up. But they held on to a sliver of hope, a gut feeling that there was something more beneath the soil. Then, one day in 2012, they received permission to search a new field. And that's when it happened. The signal wasn't just strong, it was overwhelming. As they carefully excavated, the true scale of their discovery began to dawn on them. This wasn't a small pot of coins. It was a colossal lump of earth, metal, and time. It was so immense they had to call in archaeologists and lift it from the ground with a crane. What they had found was a treasure that defied belief. Inside that giant clay and metal lump, which weighed as much as a small car, was a staggering number of coins. The initial estimate was a few thousand, then 10,000. But as the painstaking conservation work began, that number just kept climbing. 20,000, 30,000, 50,000. The final count is still ongoing, but it's estimated to be around 70,000 coins. 70,000 individual pieces of silver and gold, each one a window into a lost world. These weren't Roman coins or medieval English ones. They were Celtic, belonging to a tribe called the Coriosalite, who lived in the area of modern-day Brittany in France. The coins are beautiful, stylized works of art, featuring abstract horses and swirling patterns. But alongside the coins, something else emerged from the dirt. Gold torques, which are heavy neck rings worn by high-status Celtic warriors and nobles, silver ingots, and delicate jewelry. This wasn't just a collection of money. This was the entire wealth of a people. A community's savings, their art, their status symbols, all packed together and buried in a single, desperate act. The value is astronomical, estimated to be over £10 million. But the real value isn't monetary, it's historical. A find like this is a time capsule, a direct message from the past. And the message it sends is one of pure terror. Why would an entire community gather every single valuable thing they owned, from the chieftain's gold torque to the merchant's last silver coin, and bury it in a field? To understand this, we need to travel back in time to the middle of the 1st century BC. The world of the Celts was being torn apart. Across the water in Gaul, a storm was gathering. A Roman general, brilliant, ambitious, and utterly ruthless, was carving a bloody path across the continent. His name was Julius Caesar. Caesar's Gallic Wars were not just a military campaign. They were a systematic conquest, marked by brutal sieges and overwhelming force. For the Celtic tribes of Gaul, it was an existential threat. The Coriosalite, whose coins make up the hoard, were right in the path of the Roman legions. We know from Caesar's own writings that he fought them. He describes them as a fierce seafaring people, but against the disciplined might of Rome, their resistance was ultimately futile. Imagine the news reaching the island of Jersey. Whispers from fleeing refugees, stories of entire towns being destroyed, of people being enslaved or worse. The Roman war machine was unstoppable, and it was getting closer. Panic must have gripped the community. They knew they couldn't stand and fight. Their only hope was to hide, to flee, and to pray they could one day return. So they gathered their treasure, every last piece. This hoard wasn't buried by one person. It's far too large. This was a communal effort, a desperate act by a whole tribe facing annihilation. They dug a pit in a field, likely under the cover of darkness, their hearts pounding with fear. They carefully placed their life savings, their heritage, everything they had into the cold earth. They covered it up, disguised the spot, and then they vanished. They likely fled in their boats, seeking refuge on other islands or in lands yet untouched by Rome. They would have intended to come back. Of course they did. This wasn't an offering to the gods. It was a safety deposit box. They were waiting for the storm to pass, for Caesar and his legions to move on. They would have told their children stories of the treasure, passing down its location, waiting for the day it was safe to reclaim their wealth and rebuild their lives. But they never came back. Not a single person. This is the most haunting part of the story. 2,000 years passed and the treasure remained undisturbed. What happened to them? Did their boats sink in a storm? Were they captured by Roman patrols? Or did they simply find a new home, assimilate into new tribes? With the memory of their buried fortune fading with each passing generation until it became nothing more than a half-remembered legend, we will never know for sure. Their fate is lost to history. All we have is the treasure they left behind. The conservation of the Licatilan II hoard is one of the most complex archaeological projects ever undertaken. Using advanced 3D scanning and painstakingly slow manual work, experts are separating the coins one by one. Each coin is a clue. They are finding rare varieties, evidence of trade networks, and a snapshot of the Celtic economy right at the moment of its collapse. They even found tiny, unexpected treasures hidden within the mass of coins, things like insects and plant material that were trapped in the soil 2 millennia ago, giving us an unprecedented look at the environment of Iron Age Jersey. It's like a miniature Pompeii, frozen in time not by volcanic ash, but by fear. The story of the Licatilan II hoard is more than just a tale of buried treasure. It's a human story. It's about a community on the brink of collapse, making an impossible choice. It's about the terrifying power of war and the desperation of those caught in its path. When you look at these thousands of coins, you're not just looking at ancient money. You're looking at the hopes and fears of a lost people, a people who buried their future in a field and never got the chance to dig it back up. Their story ended that day, but the treasure they left behind ensures they will never be forgotten. Thanks for watching. If you're fascinated by the secrets hidden beneath our feet, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories from the depths of history. See you next time. Long before gold coins clinked in purses or silver bars were stacked in vaults, wealth in Mesoamerica took a far stranger form. It could be eaten, brewed, traded, stolen, counterfeited, hoarded, taxed, and even faked. It was small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, bitter enough to make first-time drinkers recoil, and valuable enough to start wars. This wealth was cacao. In the ancient Aztec and Maya civilizations, cacao beans were not simply a luxury or a foodstuff. They were currency, medicine, ritual substance, and social divider all at once. To control cacao was to control power. And between roughly 250 AD and 900 AD, the Maya perfected one of the most sophisticated non-metal monetary systems the world has ever seen, built not on gold or silver, but on seeds. The story of cacao begins in the tropical lowlands of Mesoamerica, where cacao trees thrive in warm, humid shade. These trees were temperamental, sensitive to climate and soil, and slow to mature. They could not be grown everywhere, which immediately made cacao rare. Regions that could cultivate it held an economic advantage over those that could not. The Maya understood this early. By the height of the classic Maya period, cacao had become a controlled commodity, produced in specific regions and moved along established trade routes. Archaeological evidence residue analysis from ceramic vessels, depictions in murals and glyphs in codices shows cacao being transported, stored, and consumed in highly regulated ways. But cacao was not valuable simply because it was scarce. It was valuable because of what it represented. To the Maya, cacao was sacred. It was tied to creation myths, divine ancestry, and the blood of the gods. In some stories, cacao trees sprouted from the bodies of sacrificed deities. Drinking cacao was not just nourishment, it was communion. It connected the human world to the supernatural one. This spiritual weight gave cacao a power that metal never could. Between 250 AD and 900 AD, cacao beans functioned as commodity money throughout much of the Maya world. Individual beans had standardized value. They could be counted, stored, and exchanged. Historical accounts and later colonial records suggest that cacao beans were used to purchase everyday goods: food, clothing, tools, pottery, even animals. A rabbit might cost several dozen beans, a turkey, hundreds. A fine cotton cloak could command a small fortune in cacao. Unlike barter systems, cacao currency allowed for precise transactions. Prices could fluctuate. Debt could be calculated. Tribute could be demanded in exact quantities. This made cacao ideal for taxation and state control. Royal courts understood this perfectly. Cacao beans were often stored in royal treasuries alongside jade, obsidian, feathers, and other symbols of elite status. Some caches discovered by archaeologists suggest careful accounting being sorted, protected from moisture, and guarded as jealously as any gemstone. These were not snacks, they were assets. The ruling class consumed cacao differently from commoners. Elite cacao drinks were often mixed with spices, honey, chili, vanilla, or fermented additives. The resulting beverage was thick, foamy, and intensely bitter, nothing like modern sweetened chocolate. To drink cacao in this form was to signal status. It was served at diplomatic meetings, marriage negotiations, and religious ceremonies. Common people, by contrast, rarely drank cacao. When they did, it was often diluted, less refined, or reserved for special occasions. Most cacao passed through their hands not as food but as money. This dual role, both consumable and spendable, made cacao a uniquely powerful economic tool. It also made it vulnerable. Because cacao beans were so valuable, counterfeiting became a problem. Historical records describe beans being hollowed out and filled with dirt or wax, then sealed and dyed to resemble the real thing. Some beans were reused after being spent, dried, or partially consumed. Markets had to develop systems of inspection, and merchants became skilled at spotting fakes by weight, texture, and smell. The fact that counterfeiting existed at all tells us something crucial. Cacao currency was widespread, trusted, and essential enough to exploit. Cacao also functioned as medicine. Maya and later Aztec texts described cacao-based remedies for fatigue, digestive problems, infections, and even emotional imbalance. Mixed with herbs and flowers, cacao drinks were prescribed by healers and shamans. The stimulant properties of cacao, now known to come from compounds like theobromine, were recognized long before modern chemistry explained them. This medicinal role further increased cacao's value. It was not just money, it was health. A store of cacao beans represented security in times of illness as much as economic hardship. By the post-classic period, the Aztecs inherited and expanded the cacao economy. Unlike the Maya, the Aztecs lived in a region where cacao could not grow. This made them dependent on tribute from conquered territories. Entire provinces were required to send vast quantities of cacao beans to the Aztec capital each year. Cacao flowed into Tenochtitlan by the millions, fueling markets that astonished Spanish observers when they arrived in the 16th century. Spanish chroniclers described bustling marketplaces where cacao beans changed hands constantly. They noted standardized prices, professional merchants, and strict enforcement of market rules. To European eyes, it was shocking, an empire run on seeds, and yet the system worked. Cacao had many advantages as money. It was portable, it was divisible, it had intrinsic value. It was widely desired. And because it could spoil, it discouraged long-term hoarding, keeping wealth circulating rather than stagnant. But cacao currency also had limits. Droughts, crop failures, or disruptions in trade routes could destabilize economies. Overproduction in one region could devalue beans. Political collapse could interrupt tribute flows. In times of crisis, cacao could be eaten rather than spent, collapsing monetary systems overnight. Some scholars have suggested that fluctuations in cacao supply may have played a role in political instability during the later Maya collapse. While not the sole cause, economic stress layered onto environmental and social pressures may have weakened state power. When the Spanish arrived, they initially struggled to understand cacao's value. Gold and silver were what they sought. But they quickly adapted, using cacao beans themselves as currency in early colonial markets. Ironically, it was European sugar that would eventually transform cacao from a bitter elite drink into the sweet commodity we recognize today. In doing so, something was lost. Modern chocolate is abundant, inexpensive, and stripped of its sacred context. The idea that a single cacao bean could buy a meal or represent divine blood feels almost impossible now. Yet for centuries, entire civilizations organized their economies around this fragile seed. Cacao was wealth you could drink, medicine you could spend, and power you could swallow. It blurred the line between the material and the spiritual, between survival and status. It fed bodies, healed the sick, honored the gods, and moved empires. In the ancient Maya and Aztec worlds, gold did not rule. The bitter seed did. Deep in the humid jungles of southern Mexico, where limestone temples rise like half-remembered dreams from the earth, There's a stone carving that has unsettled archaeologists, historians, and curious minds for decades. It lies not on a wall meant for public awe, but on a slab sealed inside a tomb hidden deliberate and never intended to be seen again once the stone was lowered into place. The carving is known today as the Palenque astronaut, and it should not exist. Discovered in 1952 beneath the Temple of the Inscriptions at the ancient Maya city of Palenque, the stone lid sealed the tomb of Kainich Janab Pakal, better known as Pakal the Great. He ruled Palenque for nearly 70 years during the 7th century AD, transforming a once fractured city into one of the most sophisticated centers of Maya power. His death was marked not by simplicity, but by one of the most elaborate burials ever found in the Americas. But it was not the jade mask, the wealth of offerings, or the untouched tomb that caused unease. It was the image carved into the stone itself. At first glance, the scene feels unmistakably modern. A man reclines at an angle, as though suspended rather than resting. His hands appear to grip controls. His feet press against what look like pedals. His head tilts forward toward a complex structure of tubes, shapes, and geometric forms. Beneath him, flames or something disturbingly similar seem to burst downward. It looks less like a myth and more like a cockpit. For many who first encounter the image, the reaction is immediate and visceral. This looks like a machine. Not a metaphor, not a symbol. A machine. That reaction alone has made the Palenque astronaut one of the most controversial artifacts in Mesoamerican archaeology. Official explanations came quickly. Scholars identified the figure as Pakal himself, depicted at the moment of death and rebirth. The apparent machine was said to be the world tree Waka San, the cosmic axis connecting the underworld, the earthly plane, and the heavens. The flames beneath him were reinterpreted as the jaws of the underworld, or symbolic roots plunging into Xibalba, the Maya realm of the dead. Above his head, what some see as equipment is explained as celestial symbolism: the sky monster, the heavens opening, the soul's ascent. In academic terms, the explanation is coherent. In emotional terms, it doesn't fully satisfy. The problem is not that symbolism is unlikely. The Maya were masters of symbolic language carved into stone. The problem is precision. This carving is unusually detailed, unusually technical, and unlike almost anything else in Maya art. Most depictions of the world tree are vertical, organic, flowing. This one is mechanical in posture, dense with components, rigid in structure. Pakal does not float or fall, he operates. Even his posture is wrong for traditional death imagery. He is not limp. He is engaged. And then there is the tomb itself. The lid was not decoration. It was never meant to be viewed by priests, citizens, or enemies. Once sealed, it disappeared into darkness for over 1,200 years. No propaganda value, no ritual performance, no audience. Who then was the image for? The Maya believed deeply in the afterlife, but they also believed images had power. Carvings were not just representations. They were instructions, records, and sometimes warnings. If this image was symbolic, it was symbolism meant for eternity, not interpretation. Some researchers have quietly admitted discomfort with the scene, not because it proves anything extraordinary, but because it doesn't behave like typical Maya funerary art. It breaks visual conventions. It introduces elements that feel anachronistic. And it centers the ruler not as a passive subject of cosmic forces, but as an active participant in some process. This unease created space for alternative interpretations. In the 1960s and 70s, writers outside mainstream archaeology proposed a radical idea that the carving depicts ancient technology. According to this view, Pakal is shown piloting a craft, perhaps not a spaceship in the modern sense, but a device of advanced knowledge lost to time. The flames beneath him are propulsion. The controls are real controls. The apparatus around him is machinery, not myth. Mainstream scholars rejected this outright, often dismissing it as pseudo-archaeology. Yet the image refused to go away. Part of the reason is simple. When stripped of explanation, the carving looks mechanical. Even viewers with no interest in ancient astronauts often admit that, visually, the resemblance is unsettling. The human brain is excellent at recognizing patterns, and the pattern here feels intentional. Another reason is the cultural context of Palenque itself. This was not a primitive society. The Maya possessed advanced mathematics, including the concept of zero. They charted planetary movements with astonishing accuracy. They aligned temples to solstices, equinoxes, and Venus cycles. Their calendars tracked time across vast cosmic scales. They were not strangers to the sky. Pakal's reign, in particular, was marked by an obsession with lineage, time, and cosmic legitimacy. His tomb inscriptions tie his birth and death to astronomical events. His identity was bound to celestial cycles. In that sense, depicting him in a cosmic journey makes sense. But again, the execution is strange. Why depict a journey through the cosmos as something that looks engineered rather than organic? Why show effort, interaction, and control? Then there is the matter of uniqueness. The Palenque lid stands alone. There is nothing quite like it elsewhere in Maya art. No identical scenes, no simplified versions, no repeated motif across cities. That in itself is unusual in a culture that repeated religious imagery with remarkable consistency. If this was a standard mythological scene, why does it appear only once, in the tomb of one ruler? The answer may lie not in aliens or machines, but in memory. Some historians have proposed that the carving preserves a narrative already ancient in Pakal's time, something inherited, not invented. A story from a deeper past, stylized through Maya symbolism but rooted in an experience or idea that no longer fully made sense even to the artists carving it. Over generations, meaning eroded but form remained. The Maya did not separate myth from history the way modern cultures do. Gods walked among people, ancestors became stars. Time folded back on itself. A ruler ascending into the heavens could be literal, symbolic, or both simultaneously. In that worldview, the carving does not need to depict a spaceship to feel technological. It only needs to depict something powerful that transcended ordinary life. Still, the image waits. It does not explain itself. It does not label its components. It does not apologize for its ambiguity. It simply exists, sealed in stone, daring the viewer to decide whether the discomfort comes from misunderstanding the Maya or from underestimating them. When the tomb was opened in 1952, light touched that carving for the first time since the early Middle Ages. The world had changed beyond recognition. Rockets pierced the sky. Humans spoke openly of space travel. Machines had become extensions of the body. And there, in a jungle tomb, was a king carved in stone, reclining in something that looked eerily familiar. Coincidence? Symbolism? Projection? Perhaps. Or perhaps the past is not as silent as we assume. Perhaps some images survive not to explain history, but to test the limits of what we are willing to believe about it. The Palenque astronaut does not claim that the Maya built rockets. It does not demand belief in lost civilizations or visitors from the stars. What it does demand is attention. It challenges the comfortable idea that ancient people only thought in ways we have already categorized. The stone lid remains where it was placed, guarding a king who ruled over time itself. And as long as that image endures, so does the question it poses, quiet, unanswerable, and impossible to ignore. What if history forgot more than we're ready to admit? The Talens Valley does not announce itself as a place of horror. At first glance, it appears almost gentle. A narrow river winds through northern Germany, reflecting pale skies and overhanging reeds. Meadows stretch outward in soft greens, broken only by low hills and distant trees. Birds skim the water's surface. Deer pass through at dawn. If you did not know where you were standing, you might think this valley had always been peaceful and touched, untroubled, forgettable. But the earth remembers. Beneath that quiet grass lies one of the most violent chapters of prehistoric Europe, sealed away for more than 3,000 years. Long before written history claimed that humans organized large armies, long before kings recorded victories or poets immortalized wars, the Talens Valley became the stage for a slaughter so immense that even modern archaeologists struggled to understand it. This was not a skirmish, it was not a raid. It was war planned, brutal, and final. The first signs emerged not as a revelation, but as an accident. In the early 1990s, a hobby archaeologist noticed a human arm bone protruding from the riverbank after erosion had eaten away at the soil. The bone was ancient, but what caught attention was a flint arrowhead embedded deep within it. This was not a burial injury. It was a wound sustained in life or in death during violence. As excavations expanded, the valley began to give up its dead. Skulls appeared next. Some were cracked open with blunt force trauma, their fractures radiating outward like shattered pottery. Others bore clean puncture wounds where arrows had entered and never left. Ribs were split, vertebrae crushed. Limbs lay scattered, disjointed, tangled together in unnatural positions. These were not bodies carefully laid to rest. There were no graves, no markers, no offerings. The dead had been left where they fell, pressed into the mud and trampled by survivors who had no time or no will to honor them. The scale of the violence soon became undeniable. Archaeologists estimate that at least several hundred, and possibly more than 2,000 individuals died in this single conflict around 1250 BCE for the Bronze Age. This number was staggering. It suggested not only mass death, but mass organization. Armies had gathered here. They had marched, fought, and collapsed into one another along the riverbanks. This was a battlefield that never slept. It simply sank. Weapons emerged alongside the bones. Flint arrowheads, some still razor-sharp. Bronze spear tips bent from impact. Wooden clubs heavy enough to crush skulls. Even improvised weapon stones shaped by repeated use were found among the remains. This was not a clash between equals alone. It was chaotic, desperate, and close. Men were struck from behind. Some were wounded multiple times, suggesting prolonged combat rather than swift execution. What unsettled researchers most was the evidence of coordination. Many of the skeletons belonged to young adult males, the prime age for fighters. Some showed signs of healed injuries from earlier conflicts, indicating experienced warriors rather than farmers caught off guard. Isotope analysis revealed that many of the men did not grow up locally. They came from distant regions hundreds of kilometers away, drawn to this valley for reasons still debated: trade route, strategic crossing, sacred boundary. No single answer fully explains why so many people converged here, armed and ready to kill. The Talents River itself may have been the trap. At the time of the battle, the valley was marshy and narrow, with limited crossing points. Wooden causeways and bridges once spanned the wetlands. Archaeologists discovered remnants of these structures, suggesting that the valley was a critical choke point. If an army attempted to cross while another blocked the way, retreat would have been nearly impossible. Panic would spread quickly. Men would fall into mud and water, weighed down by armor and weapons, easy targets for arrows and clubs. Some bodies were found in the river itself, as if swept away or deliberately thrown in. Others were crushed together near the crossings, forming dense clusters of death. In these places, the bones seemed to tell the same story. Men pressed shoulder to shoulder, unable to flee, struck again and again until they collapsed. There is no evidence that the dead were stripped of weapons or valuables afterward. Many still carried their gear. This suggests that the victors did not linger, or perhaps there were no clear victors at all. The survivors may have been too wounded, too frightened, or too few to return. The battlefield was abandoned, and the land slowly closed over the remains. For centuries, the valley absorbed them. Floods deposited layers of silt. Vegetation grew and died. The river shifted its course. Generation after generation lived above the dead without knowing they were there. No legends survived in writing, no monuments marked the slaughter. History, it seemed, had forgotten, yet the land did not. Locals long spoke of the Talents Valley with quiet unease. Farmers noticed that certain patches of soil refused to yield good crops. Grass grew thin and pale in places, no matter how carefully the fields were tended. Tools struck bone when digging too deep. Fog settled thicker here than in surrounding areas, clinging to the ground well after sunrise. At night, the valley felt heavy. People described an unnatural stillness after dusk, as if sound itself avoided the place. Even animals seemed reluctant to linger. Whether these stories were shaped by imagination or subtle environmental cues did not matter. Once the archaeological truth emerged, the unease gained context. The ground was not empty. It was crowded. What makes the Talents battlefield so haunting is not only the violence, but what it tells us about humanity. This conflict predates famous ancient wars by centuries. It occurred before the Trojan War was sung, before empires carved their names into stone. And yet it shows all the hallmarks of organized warfare: logistics, strategy, trained fighters, and mass death. War did not begin with history books, it began with people. The men who died here were not faceless primitives. They had families, skills, stories that ended abruptly in mud and blood. Some bore signs of malnutrition healed in childhood, suggesting harsh upbringings. Others carried evidence of long-distance travel, hinting at alliances or mercenary roles. This was a world already connected, already capable of large-scale destruction. And when the battle ended, no one stayed to mourn. The Talents Valley became a grave without ceremony, a silence without closure. The dead were left to rot, to be scattered by animals and water, to sink into anonymity. Perhaps the survivors wanted to forget. Perhaps forgetting was the only way to continue living. But forgetting does not erase. Today, archaeologists continue to uncover fragments, one bone, one weapon, one shattered skull at a time. Each discovery adds detail but also deepens the mystery. We may never know who fought here or why. No written record survives. No victor claimed the story. All that remains is the land quietly holding its breath. Stand in the Talents Valley now, and it is easy to be fooled by the calm. The river flows as it always has. The grass waves gently in the wind. Birds sing without hesitation. Yet beneath your feet, layers of history press upward, heavy with unfinished violence. Thousands of lives ended here, and the earth never truly let them go. The war did not end. It simply became quiet. And in the fog that rolls in at dusk, when the valley exhales its damp, cold air, it is hard not to feel that something is still listening, waiting, remembering a night that never truly slept. Ahoy there, history buffs and sea lovers! Today, we're setting sail back in time to uncover the incredible story of a true American legend, a ship that has defied the odds and become a symbol of national pride, the USS Constitution, better known by its epic nickname, Old Ironsides. This isn't just a story about a wooden ship. It's a tale of groundbreaking design, fierce battles, and an enduring legacy that has lasted for over 200 years. So, where does our story begin? Let's rewind to the late 18th century. The newly formed United States was facing a serious problem on the high seas. Our merchant ships were being relentlessly attacked by pirates, particularly the Barbary pirates from North Africa. The young nation had disbanded its continental navy after the Revolutionary War, leaving its commercial vessels vulnerable. Something had to be done. In 1794, President George Washington signed the Naval Act, which authorized the construction of 6 powerful warships, or frigates. And among these 6, the USS Constitution was destined for greatness. Designed by the brilliant naval architect Joshua Humphreys, the Constitution was a marvel of its time. Humphreys had a revolutionary idea: build a frigate that was faster than the more powerful ships of the line, but stronger and better armed than any other frigate it might encounter. This super frigate concept was brought to life in a Boston shipyard. The ship's construction was a massive undertaking. Its hull was built with incredibly dense and resilient southern live oak, sourced from the coastal islands of Georgia. The planks were over 7 inches thick. Its massive frame was held together by copper bolts and spikes forged by none other than Paul Revere himself. When it finally slid into the Boston harbor in 1797, it was one of the most formidable warships in the world. The Constitution's first taste of action came during the Quasi-War with France and later, in the First Barbary War, where it served as the flagship for Commodore Edward Preble's squadron. It was here, in the Mediterranean, that the ship and its crew began to build their reputation for discipline and effectiveness, blockading Tripolitan ports and projecting American power abroad. But the moment that would truly cement the Constitution's place in history was yet to come. That moment arrived with the War of 1812. The War of 1812 pitted the United States against the might of Great Britain's Royal Navy, the undisputed ruler of the seas. Many were skeptical that the small American Navy could stand a chance. On August 19, 1812, the Constitution, under the command of Captain Isaac Hull, spotted a British frigate off the coast of Nova Scotia. It was HMS Guerriere. The British captain, James Dacres, was so confident that he famously declared he would tow the American ship back to Halifax in triumph. He was about to get a very big surprise. As the two ships closed in, they unleashed devastating broadsides, but something incredible happened. The British cannonballs seemed to bounce right off the Constitution's thick oak hull. One of the American sailors, watching the enemy's shot fail to penetrate the sides, reportedly exclaimed, "Huzzah! Her sides are made of iron." And just like that, a legend was born. The nickname Old Ironsides stuck, becoming a symbol of the ship's incredible resilience. But the Constitution wasn't just tough, it was deadly. In a fierce battle lasting less than an hour, its superior gunnery and skilled crew completely dismantled the Guerriere, leaving it a dismasted, sinking wreck. It was a stunning victory that sent shockwaves across the Atlantic and gave a massive boost to American morale. This was just the beginning of its wartime glory. Old Ironsides went on to defeat or capture several other British vessels, including HMS Java, HMS Cyane, and HMS Levant. Its string of victories was unheard of and turned the tide of naval opinion. The ship that was once underestimated became a feared adversary and a source of immense national pride. It proved that the young American Navy could not only stand up to the best in the world, but could also win. The ship and its crews became national heroes. But what happens to a warship when the wars are over? By 1830, after decades of service, the Navy deemed Old Ironsides unfit for sea and scheduled it to be scrapped. The story could have ended there, a relic destined for the scrapyard. But the American people wouldn't have it. A young law student named Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. read about the plan and was outraged. He penned the powerful and patriotic poem titled Old Ironsides. The poem's opening lines, "Aye, tear her tattered ensign down," long as it waved on high, were a work of brilliant satire. It stirred a massive public outcry. Newspapers across the country reprinted the poem, and a grassroots movement to save the ship swept the nation. The public pressure was so immense that the Navy reversed its decision. Old Ironsides was saved, preserved not by an act of Congress, but by the power of a poem and the will of the people who loved her. Since that fateful day, the USS Constitution has had a long and varied career. It served as a training ship, sailed across the Atlantic on a farewell tour in the 1840s, and even served as a barracks ship. In 1931, after another major restoration funded by the donations of schoolchildren across America, it embarked on a 3-year, 90-port tour of the United States, allowing millions of Americans to see this living piece of their history firsthand. Today, the USS Constitution is the world's oldest commissioned warship still afloat. It's permanently berthed in Charlestown, Massachusetts, right next to the USS Constitution Museum, where it serves as a powerful educational tool and a tourist destination. It's not just a static display either. The ship is crewed by active-duty U.S. Navy sailors who consider it one of the highest honors of their service. Several times a year, they take Old Ironsides out into Boston Harbor for turnaround cruises to keep it seaworthy and to celebrate significant events like the 4th of July. In 1997, to celebrate its 200th birthday, the ship sailed under its own power for the first time in over a century, a truly magnificent sight. So why does this ship continue to capture our imagination? Old Ironsides represents more than just military history. It's a testament to American ingenuity and craftsmanship. It's a symbol of resilience, the ability to withstand cannonballs and the test of time. It's a reminder of how ordinary citizens can come together to preserve their heritage. When you look at its towering masts and intricate rigging, you're not just seeing an old boat. You're seeing the physical embodiment of the nation's early struggles, its surprising triumphs, and its enduring spirit. It is a ship that was built to defend a new nation, became a legend in battle, and was saved by the love of its people. The story of Old Ironsides is, in many ways, the story of America itself. Thanks so much for joining me on this historical voyage. If you enjoyed learning about the USS Constitution, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating stories from the past. Let me know in the comments if you've or had the chance to visit Old Ironsides in person. Until next time, stay curious. Few words in the English language carry the raw emotional charge of fuck. It is blunt, versatile, shocking, and enduring. Today it appears everywhere from literature and cinema to casual speech and digital slang, but for centuries its origins were cloaked in uncertainty, speculation, and myth. Unlike polite words that trace neat lineages through official documents and dictionaries, profanity tends to live in shadows, whispered, muttered, carved hastily into margins, or scrawled where authority was not looking. That is precisely why the first known written appearance of fuck is so compelling. It was not born in a royal decree, a sermon, or a literary masterpiece. It emerged instead from anger, sharp, personal, and unmistakably human-etched by a monk in 1528 who appears to have been utterly fed up with his abbot. This was not a casual joke or playful vulgarity. It was an act of rebellion preserved by accident, surviving centuries of censorship, religious reform, and linguistic evolution. What remains is a rare moment where history allows us to overhear someone from the early 16th century losing his temper in very familiar terms. To understand the power of that single obscene word, we must first understand the world that produced it. England in 1528 was still officially Catholic, still bound by monastic discipline, and still decades away from the full violence of the Reformation. Monasteries were places of strict hierarchy. Abbots held enormous authority over monks' lives, spiritual, intellectual, and physical. Obedience was not merely expected, it was sacred. Monks rose before dawn, worked long hours copying texts by hand, studied scripture, and followed rigid rules governing speech, movement, and thought. Complaints were rarely voiced aloud. Open dissent could lead to punishment, exile, or worse. Frustration, resentment, and exhaustion had few sanctioned outlets. Yet monks were also human. They argued, resented authority, and experienced moments of rage. And when those emotions escaped, they sometimes did so quietly, scratched into margins, carved into wood, or scribbled where only the writer expected to see them. That is where fuck enters the historical record. The earliest known written use of fuck appears in a manuscript dated to 1528, written in Latin with English marginal notes. These notes were not part of the official text. They were not meant for publication. They were the equivalent of private graffiti and emotional aside written by a man who believed no one important would ever read it. The now famous phrase, translated and reconstructed by scholars, reads roughly as, "Fuck the abbot." The phrasing is blunt, aggressive, and unmistakable in meaning. There is no poetic ambiguity, no euphemism, no coded metaphor. It is direct hostility aimed squarely at a superior. The monk was not making a theological argument. He was venting rage. What makes this moment extraordinary is not just the word itself, but the intent behind it. This is profanity used not as humor, not as sexual description, but as an insult almost exactly as it is used today. Writing such a phrase in a monastery was not merely rude, it was risky. The abbot was the spiritual and administrative head of the institution. To curse him, even in private, was to flirt with sacrilege and insubordination. If discovered, the consequences could have been severe. This suggests that the monk was either deeply careless or, more likely, profoundly angry. Scholars believe the comment was written during a moment of frustration, possibly after a reprimand, increased workload, or dispute over doctrine or discipline. The word choice implies emotional intensity rather than calculated rebellion. Importantly, the monk wrote the phrase in English rather than Latin. Latin was the language of formal scholarship and official record. English was the language of emotion, intimacy, and immediacy. By switching languages, the monk stepped outside the sanctioned intellectual world and into a personal one. That choice alone tells us much about how profanity functioned at the time. By 1528, fuck was already understood well enough to be used without explanation. This tells us that the word did not suddenly appear in the manuscript. It had been spoken long before it was written down. Linguists believe it originated in Middle English, possibly derived from Germanic roots related to striking, thrusting, or movement. Unlike euphemistic sexual terms used in polite literature, fuck was crude and direct. That very crudeness likely kept it out of official texts. Scribes copying religious or legal documents had no reason and no permission to include it. Yet the monk's marginal note proves that the word was alive and functional, carrying a strong emotional punch. It also proves that it already had the insulting power it retains today. The word was not neutral, it was transgressive. The margins of medieval and early modern manuscripts are treasure troves of unintended history. While the main texts follow formal rules, marginalia reveal boredom, humor, frustration, and personality. Monks drew grotesque creatures, complained about cold fingers, cursed bad ink, and occasionally mocked authority. But profanity in marginalia is rare, especially profanity this direct. That rarity underscores how strongly the monk must have felt. This was not idle scribbling, it was a release valve, a moment where discipline cracked and anger escaped in ink. Ironically, the very informality of the note ensured its survival. Because it was not part of the official text, later readers often overlooked it. It slipped through centuries of censorship precisely because it was small, private, and easy to miss. It is possible, likely, even that fuck was written earlier in lost documents, graffiti, or letters that did not survive. But history does not deal in likelihood, it deals in evidence. And this 1528 manuscript is the earliest surviving written proof of the word's use in English. What makes it especially significant is clarity. There is no debate about meaning. Some earlier alleged uses of fuck are ambiguous, hidden in names or distorted spellings. This one is unmistakable. It is not a surname. It is not a coincidence. It is profanity weaponized against authority. After 1528, fuck would remain largely absent from printed English for centuries. It existed in speech, in jokes, in insults, but not in respectable literature. Printers avoided it. Dictionaries ignored it. Moral guardians suppressed it, yet it endured. The word survived because it fulfilled a linguistic need. It expressed anger, defiance, intimacy, and intensity in a way few other words could. The furious monk did not invent fuck. He simply revealed it. In that sense, the marginal note is not just a linguistic artifact, it is a human one. It reminds us that people in the past felt rage as sharply as we do, resented authority as bitterly as we do, and reached for the same verbal weapons when pushed too far. Today, fuck is everywhere. It has become flexible, almost grammatical noun, verb, adjective, interjection. But its power has never fully faded. Even now, it can shock, offend, or electrify a sentence. That power traces back in part to moments like the one in 1528, a monk, bent over a manuscript in cold stone walls, muttering under his breath. A scratch of ink, a forbidden word. A small act of defiance that outlived kings, abbots, and the monastery itself. History often remembers the powerful, the eloquent, and the official. But sometimes it preserves something better, a flash of honesty. In that angry scribble, we hear a voice unfiltered by doctrine or decorum, a reminder that beneath robes and rules were people who could still say, with feeling, exactly what they thought. And 500 years later, we still understand him perfectly.